Yep.
Yeah, okay. So good morning, good afternoon, and hope not too close to good night. I'm going to let our guest introduce themselves first of all. So yeah, if you'd like to introduce yourself, Nick, just tell us something about where you are right now with that great hat.
Sure. My name's Nick Hopwood. I work for the University of Technology, Sydney, and right now I'm at home. And because I'm in Australia, it's important for me to acknowledge that my home is on the land of the Gadigal and Gayamagal people, which is unceded Aboriginal land.
Thank you. And Nick, what do you do?
I'm a professor of professional learning in the UTS School of International Studies and Education.
Very cool. Over to the pirate, Natalia.
Hi, Nick. So as you can see, I'm a pirate and I'm particularly interested in your precious ideas. But before we talk about this, can you tell us a little bit, where did you first encounter practice theory and what attracted you to practice theory?
It was a very specific time I first encountered practice theory, which would have been in 2009, as I was putting together an application for a postdoc position at UTS. And the person who became my postdoc supervisor was Alison Lee, and she explained to me how the group of people there were working on practice theory and suggested I put my postdoc in that area. I think what attracted it had this appeal to me that it was at once challengingly and kind of theoretical and nurtured all that kind of the abstract thinking efforts that I find really important in academic work, but it was also kind of beautifully concrete. And it kind of that sort of that combination of them felt really, really exciting. And very quickly I knew that it was a set of theories that kind of had a lot in common, but an interesting set of differences between them, which kind of I enjoyed exploring.
Awesome. And currently, what practice theoretical ideas are you working with or developing?
Most closely at the moment, I'm working with the theory of practice architectures. So associated with Kathleen Mahon, Christine Edwards-Groves, Stephen Kemmis, Jane Wilkinson. And particularly in that, I'm interested in agency.
And we also know that you have this suggestion to researchers to work dangerously with theory of practice architectures. Can you tell us a little bit about this?
Yes, so the use of the word dangerous came from some Anna Stetsenko, some writing that she did in 2020. She's based at the City University in New York in the graduate center there. She's written extensively on what she calls a transformative activist stance. And she uses the word dangerous to refer to theoretical work with the intent that the theorizing be taken up in the struggle over the future that ought to be, acknowledging that that isn't the future that is probably going to happen at the moment, and it's certainly not a future that's given to us, that the future is up for grabs, and that theorizing and theoretical work is part of that struggle over what future should there be and how can that be brought into being.
That's great, thanks. So now I will let Elizabeth, our anthropologist, to ask you a few more questions.
Yeah, that's great. And it's great because I've been itching to, dig into some of the things you've already been saying. So I'm going to do that first before really becoming an anthropologist. Tell us about agency and practice architectures. Is that a contradiction in terms?
I don't think so. I think when I come to agency, it sort of speaks to my history of kind of, the affinities I've had with versions of practice theory. One of the things that really drew me to Theodore Shatsky's work was his, if I remember the words correctly, defense of a residual humanism, that he was sort of taking issue with the very symmetrical flat ontologies like actor network theory. And Ted sort of defended the fact that humans with their intentions are different from chairs and stools and pens or whatever it might be. That just resonated with me instinctively. And I think my interest in agency comes from that idea of that curiosity about human intention, volition, and the fact that we can critically reflect on our status quo and take a degree of control over the trajectories of our lives individually and collectively. I don't think that has any contradiction with the idea of the theory of practice architectures, which has always, in my understanding, stated that vast arrangements cultural discursive, material, economic, and social political, the three kinds of arrangements they talk about, whilst they prefigure how we might go about everyday life in our sayings, doings, and relatings, they don't sew them up. There's always space for difference, for variation, for adaptation, for, particularly in my interest, transgression and transcendence. So I actually think the theory of practice architectures like Ted's practice theory and others leave that important space for possibility. And when there is possibility for difference, and when there are humans involved with their intentionality, their residual humanism, that I think is the space for theorizing agency.
Okay, what about the flat ontology then? You would sort of imply that Ted's like not subscribing to that in the same way as that. Tell us more about that.
This is where I get a little bit kind of out of my comfort zone, but I'm happy to give it a go. My understanding of flat ontologies is a principle, for example, that we might use the word symmetry. And I know it's very misunderstood in actor network theory that, kind of it's not like the chair has the same sort of force in the world as a person or a hurricane or something like that. I do remember I was very lucky that I managed to be in, seminars and things and hear people speak directly. And I do remember Ted Chatsky saying that he doesn't subscribe to a completely flat ontology, but a sort of a slightly thick plane. It's like kind of, which I don't know, is a very Ted way of saying things, but it's sort of like, yes, there is the strong materiality is one of the things of practice theory that appeals to me, as a rejection of seeing the world as a sort of whole load of brains in vats, kind of just bubbles walking around like the film The Man with Two Brains. That's not how I think we should go about understanding the world. So the strong materiality is important, which is where we get the plane, I think, the kind of that interconnectedness between people and various kinds of material objects. But the thickness comes, I think, from the fact that, that human intentionality and our ability to subscribe meaning to something. So the function as a chair is something to sit on is because I'm sitting on it. If I want to reach my light up there and use it as a step, that's because of the intentionality, the meaning I'm bringing to the chair. It's not an inherent thing in the chair. And I think that's what makes the difference between sort of Ted's practice theory and a completely flat ontology. But that's my understanding. I wouldn't be surprised if some people say I've got something wrong there.
Some kind of bumpy, flat, not quite flat, ironed out ontology.
I like bumpy. Yeah. I prefer your words, Elizabeth.
Yeah. Okay, well, we could talk more about agency, but we won't. I'm curious about your hat. Tell us about where the hat came from and what kind of tribe you're part of. It's obviously signifying some sort of affinity with badges and things like that on it. Tell us about the hat.
Oh, well, this is a beautiful question. So I met my now husband playing in an orchestra for a musical called Sweeney Todd in the Playhouse at Oxford. We're both amateur musicians. And so kind of musical theatre has always been something I've enjoyed and feel a strong affinity with. And if there's currently a musical showing in Sydney called Titanic, which is an homage to Celine Dion, very irreverent, but from a place of love. I've never laughed so hard in my life. I've seen it 4 times now, once on Broadway, 3 in Sydney. I've got my tickets for my 5th visit. And if you do what I did in the last time and book a ticket right at the front at the cap table, you get one of these hats.
Brilliant.
So I now have a small collection of them. So one of my tribe is the kind of the gays who love musical theatre. I also have my academic tribes as well, but that's the one that relates to the hat.
So that's great. I'd like to know about lots of tribes. Tell us about your academic tribe. What academic tribe are you part of?
I would say a couple. The one that's most pertinent to our discussion today would be the group of people working on the theory of practice architectures, particularly those resident in Australia. It's not only there that people are working with that. My experience of that has been of an extraordinarily warm, welcoming and generous group of people, generous with their time, generous with their intellect. It's a group of people who are collectively working on an unfinished and unsolved problem or problems. Those problems are concrete problems. Jane, who's also been on this series, leadership in schools, sustainability, but also the problem of kind of the theory and how it works. And one of the things that I really appreciate about that group of people is their collective humility and the fact that the theory is not only evolving, as many theories do, with new bits being added or things, but also sort of, I would say, revised. That particularly in some of Stephen's Chemist's writing about how he's thought about learning and its role in the theory of practice architectures, with me being from education, learning sort of one of the biggest ideas. The humility in saying, well, you know, the way we used to talk about learning isn't the way I think we should now, is something I find very appealing, that there's not this sort of sense of trying to police a correct interpretation of one or more usually living dead people's ideas, which is what many kind of theories, I don't know, that's my reading of a couple of theories. So that, yeah, my academic tribe here in Australia would be the people working on the theory of practice architectures.
Yeah, great. Okay, well, this is quite a quick visit. So I know we all want your hat, but you're probably not going to give us the hat. What souvenir are you going to give us next?
This is going to change tack completely differently. This is called a nano coaster. So as well as musical theatre, given the choice, what I could be doing any day of the week would be riding roller coasters. I have a project to ride 1,000 different roller coasters before I'm 50. I've ridden 633 different ones now.
And dare I ask, how much longer do you have to go?
5 years. So
we'll work it out.
Yeah. 100 a year will be a healthy way of getting there. And this is a model of my favorite one, which is called Zadra. It's in Energylandia, which is just near Krakow in Poland. And just looking at this fills me with joy. I don't know, there's nothing about roller coasters that I don't associate with joy. I love the fact that as a species, humans have managed to construct these machines whose sole purpose is pleasure. And I love the flattening that you get in amusement parks, that no matter where you've come from, and you're all there for the same thing, just to go on these rides. And some people are there terrified, some like me just can't wait. But whatever happens, when the train hits the brakes at the end, you just see these smiles. And I can just imagine what it would be like to be the engineers and the designers who build these things, who get to make these contraptions where in 90 seconds they can just get a group of 30 people, whoever they are, do something like this, and then the train stops and everybody's smiling. And I just have the biggest joy around roller coasters. So yeah, I can take a picture of this, and then there you go.
that would be absolutely brilliant. Yeah,
excellent. Yeah, it's really good.
Right. So where would you like us to go next? Either on the map or just somebody that you know who should be on the map, who isn't, that we should visit. Who would you like to talk to?
Doris
Who would you
Santos.
us to talk to?
Doris Santos, who's in Colombia, and she's written with Sandra Sola, also using a little bit of theory of practice architectures, but reaching out particularly to the works of Paulo Freire and Orlando Fowles-Border. They have these beautiful ideas around feeling, thinking, feeling mindfully and thinking from the heart. So kind of really fascinating ideas that challenge Cartesian dualisms, which is something I associate with. That challenge is something I associate with many practice theories. And I think in Doris's hands, it takes on a very kind of a deliciously human and caring and love-filled, but very political tenor. So she would be my recommendation.
Okay, well, we'll see. I don't know if she's on the map, but if she isn't, we'll try and get her on the map. Yeah. Great. Thank you very much.
Excellent. Thanks, Nick. The little mini roller coaster is brilliant. I'm excited about that. Really good.
Nick, I'm from Krakow, so this is my favorite souvenir right now.
You're welcome.
Go. Okay, see you later.
Are you going to stop recording? Yeah.
Yes.